Now, the Buckeye Extra Podcast with Rob Aller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast, a special edition for a special week. It's Penn State week, big game, and we have Frank Bodani from the York Daily Record, covers Penn State. He's covered for Penn State for a long time. The York Daily Record is my former paper. It's where I came from to come to the Columbus Dispatch. So I always have a soft spot in my heart for the YDR and for York in general. And welcome to the podcast, Frank.
Thank you, man. I love being here. York's where you learned everything you know now, right? That's what you do.
Yeah, I guess.
Columbus superstar. So.
Oh, yeah.
How many Ohio State, Penn State games have we covered together, do you think?
Well, I've been on the beat since 2011. So this will be the 14th, I guess, right?
Yeah.
They played every year.
Yeah.
We weren't supposed to play this year. Remember, the original schedule didn't have them on it. And then when they added Washington and Oregon, they redid the schedule. I'm pretty sure about that.
I think you're right. And because Penn State was supposed to play USC at home on the original schedule.
Okay.
And now are Penn State and Ohio State playing next year?
That's a good question. I know the answer somewhere in my, computer or whatever, but I don't know.
Okay. Well, let's get to this. Let's get to Saturday's game.
This is a big enough one, right?
Yeah.
This is a huge one. I mean, Penn State's number 3. Ohio State's number 4. Ohio State's coming off a loss to Oregon and then a shaky performance against Nebraska, had to rally in the fourth quarter. Penn State had to go to Camp Randall last week and then lost their quarterback, Drew Aller, in the first half. And somebody from somewhere I know came to the rescue. Is that right? Central
York's Bo Prabula did, yes.
Tell our listeners, our watchers about Bo Prabula.
Okay, so Bo is from Central York High School, and
Panthers,
Bo was
right.
What's that?
Panthers?
Yes, correct. Panthers. You got it. Nice job. Lots of orange and black teams in York County. So he did really well in the sense that he was 2-time state player of the year in 6A class. So that's the class where Marvin Harrison and a former quarterback was, I won't mention his name.
You can mention his name. You can
Kyle McCord. Okay. So he's not a prototypical big time power 4 stud looking quarterback, say like Drew Aller or some of the great, some of the really good ones that Ohio State's had. He's on the, he's a little bit smaller, maybe a little slender, not the biggest arm. Okay. A really good athlete. And I've actually proven to be I think a faster runner, better athlete since he's got to Penn State. I mean, he didn't have to do all that at Central York. He was able to throw the ball, at that level. He didn't have to run a lot. At Penn State, he's almost exclusively run in his 2 years playing as a backup. And Saturday, at Wisconsin, started off a little shaky, but he kind of quickly settled in, completed 10 straight passes, not all of them pretty, but 10 straight, and ran the ball well. And they ran the offense pretty smoothly with him in it after the first drive or two. So different type of quarterback though than Drew Aller, completely different, look there.
Yeah, Drew Aller's a classic drop back pocket passer. Will run if he has to, but that's about it. Obviously, Drew Aller had a terrible game last year in Columbus. Really a bad game. How much better is he this year? This is assuming he plays, and we'll talk about that next.
Yeah, he is. He's definitely better. You saw him at his worst. He wasn't like that the entire season, but here it's a growing process for quarterbacks, and they're all different. And Drew did not play particularly well in his 3 biggest games, and that means the loss at Ohio State, the loss to Michigan, the loss to Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl. He was pretty good in some ways the rest of the year. I mean, I think he set an NCAA record for most pass attempts without an interception to start a career. He only threw 2, I think, last year, the entire year, but he didn't push the ball down the field. He didn't come up big. He didn't look like he was comfortable in his biggest game. So he's been better this year. His accuracy a little better. He just looks more comfortable. He's he's played better in bigger moments. Hasn't had a stage quite maybe like this game coming up would be, but at USC, they were down to their possibly last drive of the game, 2 4th downs. He completed both passes to who? Julian Fleming.
Julian Fleming.
Yeah.
Former Buckeye. I was watching that one in the press box, I think.
Yeah.
There's Julian Fleming.
And Drew actually is a better runner. And now it's not, he's lost a little bit of weight, reshaped his body a little bit, and he's a more decisive, and he doesn't do it a lot. But when he does it, he's not bad. I mean, you're talking maybe 4 or 5 times a game.
Okay.
So he's better. He has not proven on the national stage that he's a star quarterback, like his recruiting ranking yet. So this was going to be a big opportunity for him. We just don't know if he's going to get it.
What's your sense of his health? He hurt his knee against Wisconsin in the first half. Tried to play, came out at halftime and then just couldn't do it.
Okay, the thought is, well, I mean, there's something going on with the knee, MCL or something else. I think it really comes down to the pain, discomfort level, and can he throw the ball? I mean, it's his plant leg. So can he effectively throw the ball? I mean, I think running might be out of, that could be out of the question. So a mobility, I guess, could be part of the issue too.
Yeah. But
I think more importantly is, can he run the offense the way he needs to with being able to throw the ball down the field effectively? I think, I don't know. I guess my gut is he's going to give it a shot. Now, I guess if we get to Saturday morning and he can't throw the way he wants to, I get different scenario. But my thought is he'll give it a shot. The
offensive line has been the question for many years. My sense of it is it's better this year. It's not so much of an issue. Maybe even a strength. Is that fair to say, or how would you describe the offensive line?
Yeah, it is better. They actually lost 3 NFL draft picks last year on the offensive line, but as a whole, I think it's performed better together, a little bit more of a kind of nastier run blocking attitude overall. They got one guy in particular that you will love to watch, Vega Ione, who lines up sometimes as a receiver and goes in motion to get ahead of steam to block the poor soul who is ever on the other side. And the man's 350 and can move. So they've done better. Elite, no. I wouldn't say elite line. Plus they have an injury issue.
Right.
Kind of similar to Ohio State, not as drastic. It's not left tackle, it's right tackle. And we're not sure that Anthony Donko can't play on Saturday, but he's been taken out of the past 2 games for some type of injury.
Okay. The big knock on Penn State's offense the last few years has been the lack of explosiveness in the passing game. That's still an issue. I mean, Ohio State fans obviously know Julian Fleming. That's not his forte. But they have a new offensive coordinator. He came from Kansas. Can you kind of describe what he has brought to the offense? I mean, is it more explosive? I mean, it seems like they're making more explosive plays without necessarily throwing deep downfield.
Exactly. Andy Kotelnicki is his name. And I'm going to tell you what, if nothing else, Penn State's offense is at least fun to watch. I mean,
the motion.
Oh my goodness. The window dressing and the motion is one thing. I mean, that's all the time. But the way that he can get players the ball in a good place, the way that he can utilize guys' strengths that's what he was advertised as. That's why he was one of the top coordinators, coaches in the country, assistants last year. That's what they brought him here for, and he's done it. I mean, look no more than Tyler Warren, Penn State's tight end.
Yeah.
Okay. You have not seen a tight end do more things than Tyler Warren. I am not exaggerating. The man lines up at probably 6, 7 different spots on the field. He caught 17 passes in a game.
Which game was that? I saw that. Which game was that?
USC.
17.
Okay? And he caught a touchdown pass on a play that he hiked the ball. Okay. Is that even, I didn't know that was even legal, but somehow they schemed it up. Did you see the play?
I did not see the play.
Oh my gosh, you got to see the play. So Tyler Warren lines up as the center on a uneven line, hikes the ball to Bo Prabula, who throws a pass backwards to Drew Aller, double pass, throws it downfield to Tyler Warren, who after snapping the ball runs down the field, leaps up, gets interfered with, or they didn't call it, makes a leaping touchdown catch.
How is the center a legal target?
I think it's the line shift where they had everybody pretty much but him to the right or something.
Okay.
You have to look it up. I don't know. It's a rules thing, and
Okay.
that's not even special.
So the chess game there between him and Jim Knowles is going to be
No. Yes, that is absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Could you kind of describe the Ohio State or Penn State's running backs? They're pretty dynamic. I don't think they're quite on the level of Trayvon Anderson and Quinshon Judkins, but pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, the one issue is Nick Singleton, who's the more explosive breakaway big play threat of the two, is dealing with some type of injury. He's playing, right? But he suddenly missed a game against UCLA 3-4 weeks ago. He's played since then. He just has not looked like his explosive self.
Okay.
So there's something going on there, and so we expect them both to play.
And Kaytron Allen's more of a power back.
Absolutely, yeah, he's a tough guy to bring down. Well, I mean, they both can be, honestly. I mean, they both can be pretty punishing runners, but Nick has the breakaway gear. Kaytron Allen does not. They're both pretty good catching the ball out of the backfield. Nick has really improved in that. He made a nice one-handed touchdown catch last week. But that is it. I mean, they don't really have much in the backup to those guys because they're injured right now. Mm-hmm. Penn State has probably had more injuries this year than any other under James Franklin.
Let's switch to defense. The front four is the strength. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say their secondary is pretty good. Their secondary is good.
I remember last year he didn't play well in the game, if I remember right. Who was the stud they had last year that was really highly touted and had a rough game?
Yeah, Kalen King was his.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison kind of had his way.
He did, and Kalen did not have a good year. His brother Kobe is still with him and is a really good linebacker. His twin.
Okay.
But their secondary is pretty good. They've reloaded at cornerback. They're very deep. They don't have necessarily an all-star, but they got two really pretty good guys in the portal, and they have other young guys. So they're deep and they're going to rotate. I mean, that's really the matchup, right? Is Penn State's, to me, the defense on those receivers. And the cornerbacks, I mean, they're, good luck, but they're going to have some help. Jalen Reed is arguably he's their defensive leader. He's a safety. I'm not saying he's their best player, but he's a playmaker at safety. They lost their All-American safety who's out for the year. That was a huge loss to them. KJ Winston went down with an injury in the second game, but they're still pretty good back there. Up front, you're right. I mean, they got a lot of experience. They actually run 5 deep at defensive tackle, and they're all pretty good. Not all-stars, but pretty good. Number 28, though, is on the verge of that level. He's really good. But Abdul Carter is the number 11, the guy you got to watch for.
That's the defensive end, extremely quick off the edge. And to me, that's almost the key matchup in the game for Ohio State because we don't know who's going to play left tackle. If I had to guess, I would say it's Donovan Jackson sliding over from left guard, but he's never really played there in a game. Losing Josh Simmons was just a huge loss for Ohio State. Zen Michalski played there last week and was honestly not good. Not good. He gave up 2 sacks, 2 pressures, didn't play well. And then he got hurt at the end of the game. So we don't even know if he's healthy enough, let alone whether they'd want to play him. I mean, that's, they still have some good linemen. Seth McLaughlin, transfer from Alabama, has really solidified the line at center. Jackson, is an all Big Ten caliber player. Well, he is an all Big Ten player. The right side of the line is not as strong, but again, the issue was that left tackle spot. And if Abdul Carter, if they can't block him, he's just it could be like a JT Tuimoloau in reverse, right? I mean, we saw what JT did 2 years ago, just wrecked the game. And Carter's he's capable of doing that, right?
He is. He hasn't really done it. He hasn't taken over. He's very similar in many ways to Micah Parsons.
Okay.
But he has not taken over a game like Micah did at the very end of his college career and like JT has done that Penn State fans remember. Now, the ability is there to do it. I mean, he's been disruptive. people, to me, I'm looking at Abdul Carter in a sense versus Will Howard. And I mean not only in that you got to keep Will Howard clean and upright in this game. And to me, that's the key, right? Can Penn State take advantage of the struggles or the makeshift offensive line issue? My question to you is, could they actually be better at left tackle by having Donovan Jackson slide over there than going with Mikowski, if Mikowski was healthy, do you think?
Even if he's not, if he's not, it's obviously a moot point, but even if he is healthy, maybe. I'm telling you, it was bad. And so, you have to, your left tackle has to be good. And you can hide a left guard a little bit. You can't hide a left tackle.
Right.
And the problem, though, is Donovan Jackson is a guard. He's got a guard's body. He's, he doesn't really have to deal with edge rushers at that spot, obviously. So can he handle that? I don't know. They say he can. Well, he's going to have to, because they just don't really have anybody else. The other one that they could move over is Tegra Shabola, who's a natural tackle who is playing right guard this year. He starts at right guard. He'll eventually move to tackle. It's kind of a Paris Johnson thing. But they don't want to move him midseason, especially for this game. Say, okay, Tegra been in guard all year. Here's Abdul Carter. Good luck. So, now they can do things, right? They can chip. They could have the tight end stay. Travion Henderson is a really good pass blocker. They could keep him in and there are ways to deal with it. It's not like you have to leave the left tackle on an island. But if you do that, that means Travion is not a weapon out of the backfield and all the other stuff.
You know what, though? That's a key, Bill, because I think if you're willing to give up Travion not coming out of the backfield because you can instead protect your quarterback and get the ball down the field possibly to your receivers, I think I'd give that up.
Oh, yeah. Look, it's not like, they have no chance because their left tackle's hurt.
Yeah, right.
And this is still a very, very talented team.
Absolutely.
But it is, if you watch the Nebraska game, especially early in the game, you're like, oh, this is a disaster. He just couldn't block anybody. So hopefully he's healthy. You never want someone to be hurt. But if he's healthy, he's got to play better. He just has to.
To me, I just wonder where maybe Ohio State's head is, so to speak. They have their heads on the way they need to. And I say that only because they're so good every year. They're so talented. This is still the most talented team Penn State will play. Is it tougher in a way if things, to get those guys, are they in the right place? I think Penn State's injured and vulnerable in one sense, but I think their mojo is pretty good right now.
That's a great question. We're going to find out, because I think that the Oregon loss was very disappointing to them, but they could probably look at it and say, look, this was a 1-point loss on the road, a great, tough environment to what is the #1 team in the country that played very well. And Ohio State didn't play particularly well. Denzel Burke had by far the worst game of his career. They had other chances. There were all kinds of things. They still got won the game. It came down to last play, basically. So you figure, okay, they're going to come off their bye and poor Nebraska. They're going to pay the price. And they couldn't. Nebraska controlled the game for the most part. They were the 2 deep touchdown passes, and then the fourth quarter drive that won it after they fell behind. The defense gradually kind of wilted because the offense couldn't stay on the field. And it was 17-14 with 10 minutes to go. And you're thinking, oh, my God, they could lose to Nebraska, which lost 56-7 to Indiana the week before. Now, I do think that Nebraska gets a little bit of a bum rap because they lose because of the Indiana game, for one thing. But they've lost so many close games. People forget that, they're in these close games, right? They're not getting blown out most of the time. They're in these games, and they can't figure out a way to close the deal. But they played really well. Nebraska's got some talent. They do some funky things on defense too, which I think Penn State's more of a traditional team. And, I don't think there's not the window dressing on defense that there is on offense, right? With Tom Allen, the former Indiana.
No. Abdul Carter will line up everywhere, but not overall. Not overall.
Yeah. Nebraska gave him kind of weird fronts and all that kind of stuff. And, but your point is a good one, because I'm not sure where Ohio State's heads are right now. I'm not saying that they're not where they should be. I don't know that, but I think the last week in some ways was tougher to swallow than the Oregon one, because I think that Oregon was going to be a toss up, or I think Ohio State thought they'd win, but it obviously going to be a tough game. I don't think most people thought that Nebraska would take them to the wire. And so the flip side of that is I think they're highly motivated because these guys came back to Ohio State, a huge chunk of the team, to win a national championship. And if they don't win the national championship, I mean, God forbid if they don't make the playoff, and if they lose to Penn State, that's in jeopardy, then you start to wonder about where their heads are at. But right now, I wouldn't think it'd be an issue because everything's still in front of them. But
Right.
that's why this game is so important. I think at the beginning of the year, it was a given that Ohio State would be in the playoff. When you lose one game, that takes away some of your margin for error. You lose two, and with really no chance except for Indiana of a quality win, you start skating on thin ice a little bit.
Right. And conversely, I mean, it's a huge opportunity, and we say this every year. I think we do this podcast for Penn State to finally win this game. I mean, they have 7 losses in a row, most of them fairly close, but it's like that's almost more of a telling spot on you and James Franklin if you just can get your team to be close, but you can't ever beat the other team. I mean, so, and I'm not saying that everything's falling in place for them, but you have the home crowd. You have a team that I think is at least they're having more fun playing than they have in recent years. Part of that is Andy Kotelnicki, their coordinator, and part of that is just their togetherness. And I think that means something in college at this level, So I think they have that working for them. And it's almost this, okay, you got to do it one of these years. You can't, so there is some pressure, I think, to me.
There's pressure on both coaches. Ryan
exactly.
Days, that's what is he, 2-7 in top 5 games. And you can point to a lot of those games and say, well, if this or that, right. And it's true, right? It wasn't, I mean, in rare cases, the Alabama game, the championship game in 2020, they got blown out. Other than that, they haven't really gotten blown out. Well, I guess the Michigan games, a couple of them, they did. But this is a huge game for both teams. I mean, I think it's actually a bigger game for Ohio State just because they have the one loss. Penn State can survive a loss and get the playoff. And they don't have a particularly tough schedule down the road, right?
No, they're probably their toughest thing would be going to Minnesota because it's one of those teams kind of like Nebraska and USC. You do not know exactly what you're getting when you play them.
Yeah. But if Minnesota is your toughest remaining game, you're in pretty good shape.
Oh, no.
Whereas Ohio State's got Indiana in Michigan. And again, Michigan's hasn't played well, but it's still Michigan. And there'll be so much pressure on Ohio State to win that game. So I think there is more pressure on Ohio State, but there is plenty of pressure on James Franklin to break through. Sure. I understand that.
Absolutely.
Well, I know what you predicted because you predicted for the Dispatch. So I know you picked Penn State to win.
I did. I mean, I did because I'm thinking they're going to it's a right time, right place maybe for me. In that, why I picked them only because it's not that I'm saying they're more talented. I'm thinking maybe they take advantage of right time, right place where they're trending up in how they're together. They feel they're energized, they're motivated. And Ohio State, I'm not saying they're not, but I still think they got to figure some things out. Penn State has at least an avenue to, like we talked about on the offensive line to do some things. And Ohio State's got to figure out Penn State's offense. It's different, completely different. And we don't even know who the quarterbacks are going to be. And so I think they take advantage. But having said that, could I also see a place where Ohio State hits 5 huge passing plays down the field and suddenly scores 3 touchdowns and Penn State just can't get within arm's reach? I could see that. If Penn State does not get pressure on Will Howard and they're able to throw the ball, you cannot cover those 3 guys for very long. So I think it's really a kind of a tough balance as to how this could go.
Yeah, I mean, I happen to pick Penn State mainly because the offensive line questions. That just concerns me. Mm-hmm. And it's a tough place to play. I mean, if this game were in Columbus, I feel much better about Ohio State's chances. And yes, the only time they've lost in Happy Valley is that 2016 game with the block kicks. So I get it. But I think Ohio State just kind of lost the benefit of the doubt for me. Just, but it's a toss-up game. I say 50.
Yes, it is.
It's 51-49. I mean, it wasn't like I thought, Ohio State's going to lose this game. It was like, if there's ever a time to pick against Ohio State, this kind of felt like the week to do it. Kind of.
I think Ohio State has to prove that they're okay.
I think
not talent, not ability, but they're okay as a team, because suddenly I think there's some questions, and maybe they got to prove it on the offensive line, but I think they just got to prove it, in a sense.
I think that's fair. Again, last week's performance was probably more disappointing than the Oregon performance. So they didn't really play well against Oregon. They played well enough to be in the game and have a chance. But I don't think anyone at Ohio State would say that was our A game, and certainly not last week. But I could also, look, I've covered football. We've both covered football a long time. We know this is a week-to-week proposition. How a team looks one week does not necessarily have any bearing on how they're going to perform the next week. It's just they're just all separate entities. So it wouldn't all surprise me if Ohio State just beat them. I mean, just like solidly, 38-17 kind of thing.
Yep.
I mean, that wouldn't shock me either.
No, not at all. Because we don't know. Penn State has a bunch of significant injuries that we really don't know if these guys will play or not, or how well they can play.
Yeah. And Ohio State's really only got one that we know of. Now, I think everyone's look, this time of the year, everyone's got something.
Right.
Everybody's healthy.
Right.
But
Yeah, because Penn State also could be out without their other standout defensive end, and Dennis Sutton. We don't know if he can play.
Right.
And that's kind of a big deal. I mean, he's not flashy with his numbers, but he's really, really good. And I don't know if he can go or not. So there's those type of
injury.
things.
I saw that. Yeah.
You just don't know, you don't know how that's going to play out.
It's going to be a fun game. It's going to be an interesting game. It's a noon game, not a whiteout, but it'll still be whiteout-ish, right? I mean, it's not.
Yeah, they're doing a helmet stripe.
Helmet stripe. Okay. All right. Well, Frank, as always, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for doing it. Always
Enjoy
nice
it.
to reconnect with you. And again, Frank Bodani for the York Daily Record. Thank you very much for being on the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.